Hello students, I am Dr. L.K. Das, Assistant Professor of Sociology at the Department of HSS, IIT Roorkee. Welcome to another lecture for the NPTEL course Power and Politics in Contemporary India, a Sociological View. Today, in this lecture, we will understand the transformation of caste and from a political category to a ritual category and once again to a political category. So, in this, we are going to move through a number of periods, from the pre-colonial period to colonial period and to the post-colonial period. So, what are we going to do here? We are going to also use a historical sociological lens in order to look at it. So, as you might be aware of that caste, the word itself is a Portuguese origin, which is which essentially means breeding or a lineage. But in the Indian context, it is also understood as varna or a ritual category, or in terms of ritual hierarchy, and jati as a birth based community. Now, when we are talking about ritual hierarchy in terms of varna, as discussed in the previous class, you have the varna of Brahmins, you have the varna of Kshatriyas, you have the varna of Vaishyas, and you have the varna of Shudras, and then the Panchamas or the ex untouchables. But jatis could be numerous. It could, as a matter of fact, there could be thousands of jatis. So, Brahmins within themselves could be subdivided into numerous jatis. So, about Kshatriyas, so about the Vaishyas, so about the Shudras. So, currently, if you look at, go and check out the number of jatis who are part or subcastes who are part of the list of OBC. Most often than not, all of them are part of this Shudra Varna, and their number within the OBCs could range to hundreds, if not thousands. So, that is how it is categorized, and the core feature of it is separation in marriage, division of labor, and hierarchy, which we have already discussed in the previous classes. Now, in the pre-colonial period, as we discussed in the last class, caste hierarchies were both local as well as fluid, which means that, as Airavati Kharge mentioned, there was a different caste understanding of caste in northern India, there was a different understanding of caste in eastern India, there was a different understanding of caste in southern India, in western India, and central India. There was no unified identity of one single jati or one single varna or one single caste, which is pan-Indian. So, anybody who had the connection with the kings, anybody who had become powerful, they could, through control over land, through royal patronage and through temple honors, claim to be a superior caste then or superior jati than they were assigned. So, this assignment was not about textual purity, rather it was about variations, the lived experiences of people or lived experiences of jatis. That is the reason why the power and caste, they were relational and not purely ritual. It changed when the British came here, because first thing that the British did is to do away with kings or the rule of the kings. Rather, what they did was they created kings, and these kings, as in return, created their own the unified and crystallized forms of racial purity. So, in a sense, maybe in 1000 AD, there were rulers, correct? In 1500 AD, a different set of rulers came. In 2000 AD, a different set of rulers came. These rulers could be the direct descendant of Aryans, these rulers could be the direct descendants of Chandragupta Maurya. And so this kind of classification that I am making in terms of AD or BC, it makes no sense at all in the historical terms. I am just giving an example. Okay. So maybe from Chandragupta Maurya. And we all know that Chandragupta Maurya was not a born Kshatriya. Rather, he came from a shepherd caste. Now, a shepherd caste is a Panchama, is it Shudra, what is it? Certainly not Kshatriya the way it is currently understood. But he went on to build one of the greatest empires the Indian subcontinent or South Asia had ever witnessed. Now, if the crystallization of the caste would have happened some 2300 years back, then whatever he would have achieved, he would not have been considered to be a Kshatriya. There are numerous scholarly literature now which tells us that all over central India, all over eastern India, all over southern India, most of the kings were not Kshatriya by birth. Rather, they attained the status of Kshatriya after they got control over land, after they got royal power by dislodging the existing royal power. And the existing royal power, they went into oblivion. We don't even know whether they are still there or not. What changed during the colonial period was that the crystallization of caste happened, and once you have become a king or a raja, then you always remain a raja. Think about it that even though there are no kingdoms in India any longer, how many individuals or how many families still want to be addressed as Maharajas or Rajas or Nawabs or even Nijams. So that was a kind of crystallization that happened during the period of the British rule, because the British, through ethnographic methods, through anthropological methods, wanted to crystallize categories, because they were also creating written documents in the form of knowledge systems, and these knowledge systems were used in order to govern as well as rule this country. This knowledge system was about land, this knowledge system was about marriage, this knowledge system was about rituals, and this knowledge system was about creating status and hierarchies. When all of them came together, the colonial knowledge system created a crystallized form of social cohesiveness. So, what was once a political identity became a ritual hierarchy. And one area which was very significantly used and abused by the colonial forces, colonial historiography as well as colonial bureaucracy, was reification of caste. What is reification of caste? Reification means that the caste was given an embodied life. Why? Because caste, as I said, is a closed category. Class is an open category. Through your work, you can move up and down a class order, but never in a caste cycle. The only way to move out of caste cycle is by doing good karma, and that can happen only in the afterlife, not in this life. So this way, the first thing the rulers did was that they created a form of caste consciousness among themselves by using Brahmanical texts, or the texts which were essential in the creation of a division between the enlightened, civilized and rational West and a caste infested Orient. which is defined by closed categories, which is defined by hierarchies, which is defined by a lot of issues that are not there in the West, particularly that of ritual status, because mind you, India is spiritual, religious, whereas West is not so. So whether it was Louis Dumont in the post-independence period or it was Risley during the colonial period, they solidified an idea of India which was based on caste and caste consciousness. Caste was given the idea of a race. If it is intercaste marriage, that means it is interracial marriages. If it is intra-caste marriage, that means purity is being maintained and your genetic order is also maintained for a certain kind of superiority. But two things happened here. While the colonial knowledge system was creating these crystallized categories, people in India, they were creating their own categories, because once it is written down that you are upper caste, you want to remain as upper caste. Once it is written that you are from the lower caste, you would not like to remain as lower caste, right? Because what was not written before, now it has been written down. And because the colonial state was open to categorization, and in 1901, 1911, 1921 as well as 1931, the census that we had, we also had caste census, and during all these decadal censuses, different groups of people would come to Risley, would come to the census enumerators and claim that they have been wrongly represented. So rather than calling themselves as lower caste or Shudras, they would rather call themselves as Kshatriyas. Check out around your place how many people use their surnames which are part of or which have historically been used by Kshatriyas. It could be Singh, it could be Kaur, or it could be any similar kind of the surname. And this was also for the first time that Indians started using surnames. Before that, very few people had surnames. They were usually their surnames were associated with their parents or their the locality they were coming from. So this is the reason why while colonial period created this monster of caste, which is rigidified, which is crystallized, the caste consciousness that people started gaining in terms of the census and the written document created another problem of classification, because everybody wanted to contest and claim a higher rank, because they realized that individuals cannot do or cannot impact the colonial government. They created caste associations. Brahmins had their own caste associations, Kshatriyas had their own caste associations, Kayas had their own associations, Marathas had their own associations, so on and so forth. And through these associations, they went to the census enumerators or to the colonial state, in which they would show documents, they would argue that no, the way they have been represented by the census enumerators as being lower castes or as being Shudras, that is not correct. Even among the Brahmins themselves, there could be different kind of subjatis or subcastes, and each one of them would argue that they are not the lowest among the Brahmins. The same would go with the Shudras, the same would go with the Vaisyas, and the same would go with the Kshatriyas. So just imagine for a moment that somebody claims themselves to be Kshatriyas, but they, in terms of occupation, they are farmers. Now, farmers within Indian society in certain areas are not really considered to be upper caste. So, how can somebody who is not exactly upper caste claim to be Kshatriyas? There has to be a process through which it can be done. And it was done through the creation of caste associations. And these caste associations, through the petitions, protests, and reclassification campaigns, claimed that they are Kshatriyas, because throughout history, the status of Kshatriya has always been open, because this is not with ritual categorization, this is purely with the power you have or the material power you have in terms of arms, in terms of land, in terms of your claim to the rule. So that is the reason why, while caste was created in the image of a hierarchy by the British colonial rulers and its intellectuals and scholars, when Indians adopted it, they adopted in order to bridge the tradition and modernity. Because caste, the way the British understood, it was a modern creation, not a traditional evergreen factor of Indian society. So the public identity as well as personal idea about what caste is, whether somebody is from backward caste, somebody is from forward caste, that became a lot more muddled. That is the very reason for which after 1931, earlier the colonial government and then the post-colonial government in India did not have caste census, because it became a mess and nobody wanted to get entangled in this entire framework. So while Brahmanism was at an upswing through colonial publications, through colonial knowledge production, different areas within India or colonial India witnessed radical caste movements. And these caste movements, whether it was in Western India, it was in Southern India, Eastern India, or Northern India, wanted something else than the way the textual categorization of Brahmanism or the textual categorization of Varna Vyavastha was being projected to the nation as natural, as everlasting. So, Mahatma Jyotirao Phule in Maharashtra, or that time the Bombay Presidency, understood this, because he had also experienced the Brahminical rule or the kind of rule that was there in Maharashtra after the Marathas became little weakened and the Peshwas took over power and Pune became the center of Peshwa power. What was happening? So this way he wanted to provide modern education for the groups who were oppressed during this period owing to this domination, so that these groups of people can take advantage of British colonialism and the administrative control, administrative rule, as well as many other opportunities that were coming up. The same thing was done even by Periyar, because Periyar not only rejected Brahmanism, his movement was about anti-Brahman or non-Brahman movement. That is also, it's quite interesting to see, because what they would argue in that period was that while the British had come from outside and they were willing to provide certain kind of liberty to the local people, only a certain caste of people, particularly the Ayers and Iyengar Brahmins of Tamil Nadu, a Madras presidency, got themselves employed there. So all the administrative positions, all the educational positions, all the legal positions, they were taken over by a particular caste of Brahmins, which led him to see that because a certain group of people or a certain caste of people are taking over everything, and in effect they are creating a system of knowledge in which only they are at the top and everyone else in that group happens to be at the bottom. Secondly, a racial categorization also was created during the same period, in which the bottom dwellers happen to be from a inferior race or inferior race, and the top dwellers happen to be from a superior race. They could also be Aryans, and others are non-Aryans or an-Arya. So Periyar claimed that the only way to subvert this kind of a status is by proclaiming a self-respect movement for the bottom dwellers, in which they claim that we are completely different. So this is also a racial categorization, by the way. While the Brahmins claim to be Aryans, he claimed that the bottom dwellers happen to be Dravidians. And Dravidians are a different racial category altogether, according to him. But this group of people were a very small minority, maybe not more than 2% of the population, who had a massive impact over the ownership of resources and control over resources. So once this self-respect movement alongside the Dravidian categorization came into being, this movement dislodged the Brahminical framework as the top dwellers. So he rejected many things. He rejected priestcraft, he rejected Hindu patriarchy, and in effect he rejected the Brahmins or the role of Brahmins in society itself. But the most radical among them was Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar, because he was not only looking at one specific zone or one specific region or one specific caste. Rather, what he did was that he created an entire framework for all the groups of people who have been dispossessed, who have been depressed, as well as who have been part of a system which claims that the only way to attain emancipation is through good karma and death. Rather than having good karma here and having emancipatory and egalitarian the framework to live in this particular life. So that is the reason why he created and sought legal equality and constitutional equality. And this is the fundamental position because of which he had opposed Gandhi and Varnashram Vyavastha, because Varnashram Vyavastha of Gandhi was about retaining caste and all its hierarchies, whereas for Ambedkar, caste itself is the problem. It's not just about untouchability, caste itself is the problem. So we have to do away with caste. He went on to the even more radical stage, in which he said that we have to annihilate caste itself, and he ended up converting to the Buddhism or a new form of Buddhism that he had created called the Navayana Buddhism. So this way what we see is that while caste as a category was framed by the colonial Britishers and crystallized by the colonial Britishers, Indians reused and repurposed caste through radical caste movements and through different other movements. In the post-independence period, particularly in the 1950s and 1970s, there was upper caste hegemony in Indian democracy. Most of the parliamentarians in the regional level as well as at the national level were from the upper caste, because Congress was in hegemonic position, and within Congress Brahmins, Rajputs and Baniyas happened to be in hegemonic position. So they were we attained political citizenship we attained political emancipation, but we did not attain social emancipation. You remember we had discussed this in the previous classes. So, Gandhian ideology was adopted, but Dalit representation was fragmented. What does this mean? It means that Dalits were represented because we had SC/ST reservation, correct? Because we had SC/ST reservation, so Dalits and tribals were represented. But within the Congress party, they did not have any autonomy. Only the ones who got co-opted to the dominance, to the hegemonic framework of these three groups, they were allowed to remain and growth within the party and outside of the party. Anybody who opposed them were thrown out of the party or were pushed to a corner. So, in effect, we had structural inequality within the society, but we had national unity. And this got framed out in different regions differently. In the north, in the south, and in the west, there were different scenarios. In the south and the west, as I said, discussed previously, because of Dravidian and non-Brahmin movements, the assertion of the lower castes or so-called lower caste was early on. So, they not only attained political power, but they also try to append economic as well as social exploitations. So, which created a sense of mobility. If you see most of the political leaders, most of the bureaucrats as well as most of the big and small business who are now in South India, particularly Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, or even Karnataka and Kerala, very few of them would be from the pan-Indian upper castes. Most of them would be the so-called OBCs. So, the British era policies of Rayatwari and early form of reservation enabled mobility there, which was not the case in North India, because in North India the mobilization was quite laggard, as well as it did not happen immediately. Why? Because there was the zamindari system. So, the rayats or the farmers and peasants did not own the land they were cultivating, whereas zamindars had thousands of acres of land under their control. There was Sanskritization, in which rather than creating a different cosmological genealogy as well as cosmological ontology for themselves, many of the middle castes and lower castes wanted to Sanskritize themselves. For example, take the case of Yadavs in northern India. They Sanskritized themselves to claim that they were Kshatriyas rather than Shudras, because they are now tracing their genealogy and their lineage to all the way back to Krishna, and Krishna was a king, he was a god king. So, somebody whose origin lies in Krishna, how can they be Shudras? So, that is the reason why the ideology that came forward was not exactly emancipatory the way we see it in the south and western part of India. In northern part of India, we can see though that although it was a little late, but when it came with a lot of force. With the works of Ram Manohar Lohia or with the works of Chaudhary Charan Singh, we see that different imagination is happening here. Lohia brought socialism and spoke about caste-based reservations so that its majority in the democratic republic also gets its share in the running of this republic. On the other side, we have the Kisan politics, in which Chaudhary Charan Singh argued that irrespective of whatever jati you are from, or many times even whatever religion you are from, we are all farmers. So, our identity is that of a Kisan. There is no other identity that we are going to use because our Kisani gives us the identity of being a Kisan. Our livelihood is dependent on this land, our life is dependent on this land, so our identity is also dependent on this land. So let us make our work as synonymous to our caste. So in Western UP, you had the Jat leaders under the Chaudhry Charan Singh becoming very powerful as a negotiating factor, as a dominant caste factor in the entire region. And this is not just Western UP, this is also true about the Haryana, and this is also true about Punjab, where the Jat farmers became, or the Jat farmers came together as farmers first and then anything else, whether they are Sikhs, they were Muslims, or they were of any other caste. So in effect, what they did was that they reoriented caste from moral status to instrument of political representation. We as farmers coming from farming caste, we are going to elect somebody who is also from the farming caste. We are not going to elect or not going to even vote for someone else. Then next came a big revolutionary change in Indian politics in the form of Mandal Commission and Mandal Movement, in which 27% of the seats in educational institutions in the job sector was supposed to be reserved for OBCs, the other backward classes, which were essentially in the ritual hierarchy. They were from the Shudra Varna, which led to a massive backlash from the upper castes or upper caste groups. Although this entire frame was of Mandal report and Mandal Commission and the Mandal movement was represented by the upper caste as the worst phase in post-independent Indian history, it gave very dominant and well articulated OBC leaders, whether it was Lalu Prasad Yadav, Mulayam Singh Yadav, or others, because the entire politics now revolved around Mandal. Whether we are going to get this reservation or we are not going to get this reservation. If we are going to get this reservation, then how we are going to get it, and what are we going to do in order to make it sure that we are benefiting or OBC is benefiting from this. Yes, you can be ritually superior, but I'm not going to vote for you. I don't even want you to become my bureaucrat. Don't come and govern us. If I have voting power, I have voting right, that means I'm going to use it for my own group of people, not others. But an upper caste dominated Congress party could not understand the changing circumstances that were happening in northern India as well as all across the country. Because they did not make modifications in right time, so the entire vote bank that the Congress had among OBCs, among Dalits, got fragmented among different OBC and Dalit and other kind of caste or jati led the political parties as well as regional parties. So the second aspect of this transformation was that of Bahujan politics, because not only the OBCs were creating their own political parties, even Dalits wanted their own representation. And within this moment happened Kansiram and Mayavati. Kansiram and Mayavati, they had a very different idea of how to galvanize society and how to create this moment in which the power would always remain with the Bahujan or the 97-96% of India's population. And Kansiram particularly, by bringing Ambedkarite ideology, completely rejected the assimilationist the ideas of Hinduism by saying that SCs, STs, OBCs and the minorities are numerically superior in the country. And if they are numerically superior and they are the ones who are voting, then they should be voting for their own representatives rather than the representatives who have been compromised. So he wanted to transform numbers into political power. One person, one vote, right? If one person, one vote, and the one group of people have 10 persons, but they are occupying the seat of chairman, the chief minister, prime minister, president, and everyone else, that means there is some problem. So let us have the 90 individuals choose their own CM, their PM, and their president. And they were quite pragmatic in that sense. Through they had only one ideology, that they have to galvanize everybody to come to power. If not so, then we don't count. So they followed what was called electoral pragmatism, in which even if ideologically they are opposed to BJP, they would still work with BJP to come to power. And Mayawati after Kansiram became the biggest symbol of this assertion, because she not only became the chief minister of the Uttar Pradesh multiple number of times, but also she created institutions in the form of universities, in the form of colleges, renaming places, also in the form of creating gardens, in the form of creating memorable as well as uh, monuments. This way, in a long lasting assertion of Dalit groups could be visualized. So it's not just about becoming powerful and coming to power, but also visualizing that coming to power. So caste became both ideological identity as well as electoral instrument. They knew what caste is, and they wanted to bring all the castes together so that there can be electoral reforms, and this electoral reform would be related to caste. So the caste, now the way the caste is the persisting in Indian society, it's not through the ritual practices, rather it is through the grammar of politics. And it has and democracy has been used, utilized and mobilized to be part of this modern politics, so that what could not be achieved through ritual, the Sanskritization, can now be achieved through democratization as well as through the process of democratic assertion. So in conclusion, we can say that over the period of 100-150 years, what we have seen is the ritual hierarchy within caste, or ritual hierarchy created by caste, has now transformed itself to political mobilization. Caste has attained a public identity, but the ones who had gained maximum because of their caste identity as well as their caste position in terms of ritual purity during the colonial period and as well as pre-colonial period, are now blaming others who are late to the party, that we are general caste, we don't believe in caste, whereas the others are castists, others are believers of caste. And by bringing the issue of reservation, by bringing the issue of caste assertion in terms of whether it is Lalu Yadav, Mulayam Singh Yadav, Nitish Kumar or others for that matter, that they are diluting and polluting or corrupting the democratic fabric of India. In the next classes, we will discuss further into how mobilization is working and how we can understand caste and kinship type of mobilization in the Indian context. In the meantime, you can go through these questions and see for yourself where do they fit in, and how you as a student, how you as an aware citizen of this country can look at these questions and shape your own opinion by using certain categories, by using certain concepts, by using certain theoretical frameworks. So you can also go through some of these works. The Nicholas Dirks we have already discussed. Louis Dumont also you can go through Jeffrey Loth, Rajni Kothari as well as the Emin Srinivasa's work. Rajni Kothari's work, Caste in Indian Politics, will discuss in detail in the next class. Thank you.